There is a plant that once fed millions, that grew in the dust and in the rock, in the highlands and the floodplains, in soil so poor that modern agriculture would not bother to name it. A plant that provided more protein per grain than wheat, that required nothing from the farmer but patience and a place to root. It was not forgotten because it failed. It was banned. An empire looked at this plant, understood what it meant to the people who grew it, and made the decision to erase it, not metaphorically, by decree, by force, by fire. The Spanish crown in the 16th century outlawed the cultivation of amaranth across the territories it controlled. Fields were burned, stores were confiscated. Those found growing it faced punishment. You do not ban a weed, you ban a threat. And amaranth, quiet, resilient, indifferent to poor soil and political orders alike, was the most dangerous kind of threat. It fed people without permission. It grew without instruction. It could not be owned because it refused to be scarce. What cannot be made scarce cannot be controlled. And in the logic of empire, what cannot be controlled must be destroyed. It was not destroyed.
This is Ancient Food Files, a channel dedicated to the recovery of knowledge that was buried, not because it was wrong, but because it was inconvenient, because it belonged to people whose systems were dismantled, and because the plants that sustained those systems were too independent to fit inside the architecture of what replaced them. If you are someone who understands that the most important things are often the things that were taken away before you were born, this archive is for you. Consider subscribing, not as a transaction, but as an act of preservation. Open the record. In the highlands of what is now Mexico and Central America, long before any European had placed a foot on that soil, the Aztec civilization, the Mexica, built a food system around 3 plants: maize, beans, and huautli. Huautli, the Nahuatl name for amaranth. It was not a supplemental crop. It was not a famine food. It was a cornerstone. Alongside maize and beans, it formed the nutritional architecture of one of the most complex urban civilizations in the pre-Columbian world. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, built on a lake, home to 200,000 people at its height, was fed, in part, by this plant. The amaranth plant stands tall. In full growth, it reaches 2 meters and above, its stem thick and ridged, its leaves broad and deep green, flushing to red and burgundy at the margins as the season advances. At the top, the seed head emerges, a dense, feathered plume of color, magenta, gold, deep crimson, a flame of a plant, vivid against the dry season sky. The seeds are small, almost impossibly small, round, pale gold, with a faint pearlescent sheen. One plant can produce as many as 50,000 of them. 50,000 seeds from a single stalk in a single season, with almost nothing asked in return.
In Aztec cosmology, huautli was not merely food. It was sacred. Figures of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, were shaped from amaranth seeds mixed with honey and human blood, then ceremonially consumed. The eating of the god, a communion in the most literal sense. The Spanish, when they arrived and witnessed this rite, understood immediately what it meant, not just spiritually, strategically. To destroy amaranth was to sever a people from their god. The Inca of South America grew a related species they called kiwicha. The peoples of the Himalayan foothills in what is now India and Nepal cultivated rajgira. Across Africa, wild amaranth was harvested from roadsides and river margins for centuries, its leaves cooked as greens, its seeds ground into flour during times of scarcity. Every continent except Antarctica held some version of this plant. Every tradition found it. Every tradition that found it kept it. The reason amaranth survived everywhere it landed is not cultural, it is biological. Amaranth is a C4 plant. This is a classification of photosynthetic efficiency, a mechanism that allows certain plants to fix carbon dioxide at high temperatures and low water availability, with substantially less loss than ordinary plants. Maize is C4. Sugarcane is C4. They are among the most productive plants on Earth under stress conditions. Amaranth is C4, which means it functions where other crops begin to fail. In the midday heat, in the dry months, in the laterite soils of West Africa, or the volcanic ash soils of highland Mexico. It does not merely tolerate poor conditions, it performs in them. Its root system is aggressive and deep. It draws water from layers that shallow-rooted crops cannot reach. It does not need irrigation in the ordinary sense. It does not require nitrogen-rich soil. It fixes its own nutrient relationships. Given a patch of ground, almost any patch of ground, it grows. And then it feeds. 100 grams of amaranth grain contains approximately 13 to 14 grams of protein, more than wheat, more than rice, more than maize. Critically, it contains lysine, an essential amino acid almost entirely absent from other common grains. A diet based on amaranth is nutritionally complete in ways that a diet based on wheat or rice alone is not. It is, in the most precise sense, ungovernable by climate, indifferent to soil poverty. It grows where farming is supposed to be impossible, and it nourishes completely when it does. For a civilization trying to feed a city in a highland lake basin, this was not a fortunate accident. It was the foundation.
In the 1970s, a botanist named John Robson at the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania began documenting what traditional Mesoamerican farmers had known for thousands of years. His reports on amaranth's nutritional profile, circulated within agricultural research communities, prompted the National Academy of Sciences in Washington to convene a study. The 1984 report, Amaranth: Modern Prospects for an Ancient Crop, concluded that amaranth was one of the most nutritionally promising plants available for cultivation in resource-limited environments. It noted the protein content, the lysine density, the drought tolerance, the soil indifference. It used careful, academic language. Beneath that language was something close to astonishment. Subsequent research confirmed the findings and extended them. Studies conducted in the 1990s and 2000s at institutions including the University of Nebraska and CIMMYT, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, documented amaranth's capacity to maintain yields under soil and climate conditions that reduced wheat yields by 40% or more. Research into the squalene content of amaranth oil, a compound associated with cardiovascular protection, added a further dimension. The plant fed. It also, the data suggested, protected. It was not a discovery. It was a confirmation of something the Mexica had expressed in the architecture of their civilization. But science does not undo memory. For the communities that descended from those who had grown amaranth for millennia, the plant carried a weight that nutritional reports could not address. In the centuries following the Prohibition, amaranth did not disappear entirely from Mexican life. It persisted in a diminished form, in alegria, the seed and honey candy still sold in the markets of Mexico City, in the remembered practice of a grandmother who scattered seeds in the corner of a plot that no one else used. But it also persisted as a symbol of what had been taken, of what had been burned. The foods that sustain a people through their worst centuries do not emerge from those centuries untouched. They carry the suffering they witnessed. Younger generations, educated in systems that valued European grains, sometimes turned away from amaranth not with hatred, but with a quiet, generational exhaustion. The food of survival can become, over time, the food of defeat. This is not unique to amaranth. It is the pattern of every crop that fed a colonized people through their dispossession. The forgetting is not accidental. It is the final echo of the original suppression. The world's agricultural situation is not stable. Global wheat production is under pressure from heat stress in growing regions that have been reliable for centuries. Water tables beneath irrigated farmland in India, China, and the American Great Plains are dropping at rates that hydrologists describe without qualification as unsustainable. Topsoil loss from industrial monoculture continues at a rate that soil scientists have consistently failed to make the public understand. Approximately 1 millimeter per year on average, against a natural regeneration rate measured in centuries. Into this landscape, consider amaranth again, a grain that grows in soil too poor and too dry for conventional agriculture, that needs no synthetic nitrogen, that produces a nutritionally complete food in conditions that would end a wheat harvest, that can be grown, and has been grown, in the margins, in the overlooked corners, in the plots that no agribusiness company will ever photograph for a promotional calendar. It does not need the world to realize its value. It does not need investment, or infrastructure, or policy frameworks. It needs a seed, which it supplies itself. It needs ground, almost any ground, and it needs a person willing to plant it, which somewhere in Mexico, in India, in Ethiopia, in Nepal, there has always been. The system that banned amaranth is fragile. It always was. Amaranth is not. There is a particular quality to knowledge that has been suppressed rather than lost. Lost knowledge fades. Suppressed knowledge waits. It persists in the margins, in the seed packets passed between hands, in the old woman who still grows it in the corner of her garden and does not fully know why except that her mother did, and her mother's mother before her. The decree that banned amaranth in the 16th century is 500 years old. The plant it was written against is 8,000 years in cultivation and does not know the decree exists. It grows in cracks in walls, in roadsides, in the disturbed earth of construction sites. It volunteers itself in gardens where it was never planted. It does not need your belief in its importance to continue being important. That is the nature of something that was designed over millennia to survive collapse. It has seen empires before. It watched one fall. It will watch others. The knowledge was not lost. It was waiting, in the soil, in the seed, in the memory of every community that kept one small plot growing when the empire said not to. It is still waiting. If you believe the most important histories are the ones that were nearly erased, this is where they are kept. Subscribe to Ancient Food Files, not to grow a channel, but to keep a record.